Long before the thunder of armies and the clash of steel marked his name in history, he was a boy born into a world of uncertainty and ambition. His early years were shaped by a small but proud kingdom, a land brimming with opportunity and peril, where power was earned through courage, cunning, and an unyielding will. From a young age, he displayed a mind attuned to strategy and an innate sense of leadership. While other children played with toys, he studied the movements of soldiers, the flow of rivers, and the patterns of the wind, seeing in every detail a lesson for the battlefield to come. His family, though not of the highest nobility, recognized his potential and ensured that he received the finest education, blending lessons in philosophy, history, and warfare, a rare combination that would later distinguish him among kings and generals alike. The political landscape of his youth was as treacherous as any battlefield. Neighboring realms eyed his kingdom's wealth and strategic position with envy, while within the court, ambition often wore the mask of loyalty. This early exposure to intrigue taught him that victory was not solely achieved with armies. It was won with intellect, foresight, and, at times, a keen sense of timing. Tales of legendary generals and the rise and fall of empires filled his imagination. Each story, whether of triumph or catastrophe, left an indelible mark on his psyche, forging a determination to master not just the art of war, but the art of survival and influence in a world ruled by both sword and scheme. His first forays into leadership came early, often in unexpected ways. At just 15, he led a small band of men to quell a local rebellion. Though modest in scale, the engagement revealed his natural talent for strategy. He assessed the terrain, anticipated enemy movements, and inspired his followers with unwavering confidence. By the time the skirmish ended, the rebellion was suppressed, and a young leader had emerged, one whose name would later be whispered with equal parts fear and admiration across courts and camps alike. This was a man for whom caution was calculated, risk was measured, and every decision carried the weight of both consequence and opportunity. The cultural and military environment of the time further honed his abilities. Armies were composed of diverse units, infantry, cavalry, archers, and specialized engineers, and success depended on coordination, logistics, and discipline. He absorbed these lessons early, studying not just his own forces but those of potential adversaries. Ancient texts, battlefield manuals, and first-hand observation of veteran soldiers provided him with a toolkit of knowledge that he would later use to outmaneuver opponents who often underestimated him. Beyond mere tactics, he developed an understanding of morale, loyalty, and the psychology of warfare, a dimension too often ignored by leaders who relied solely on brute force. But it was not only intellect and skill that defined him. Even as a young man, he possessed a charisma that drew people to him. Soldiers followed not merely out of duty, but out of belief in his vision and admiration for his courage. Allies trusted his judgment, rivals feared his insight, and mentors recognized a rare combination of wisdom and audacity. This early magnetic presence laid the groundwork for the command he would one day wield over thousands, a command earned not through title alone but through undeniable competence and personal gravitas. Yet, even in these formative years, the shadows of future challenges loomed. Ambition, while a driving force, carried risks. Enemies within and beyond his borders were already calculating their moves, waiting for moments to test his resolve. And though victory came quickly in small skirmishes, he would soon face trials that no tactical brilliance alone could overcome. These early victories, rich with promise, set the stage for a dramatic ascent, a rise that would inspire awe, spark envy, and ultimately, lay the foundation for both extraordinary triumph and unforeseen tragedy. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a vivid portrait of a young prodigy on the brink of legend, a mind sharpened by curiosity, a heart tempered by ambition, and a world filled with both opportunity and peril. The first stirrings of his epic journey are clear, teasing the moment when a boy with vision becomes a commander whose name will echo across battlefields and into history. With the foundation of his genius laid in youth, the commander's rise transitioned from promise to legend as he stepped onto the broader stage of war. His first major campaigns were more than military engagements. They were proving grounds where intellect, courage, and audacity intertwined. The world around him was unforgiving. Rival kingdoms, hostile terrain, and unpredictable alliances tested every decision he made. Yet, time and again, he turned adversity into opportunity, demonstrating an uncanny ability to anticipate the enemy's moves and exploit weaknesses before they were apparent. Historical records describe his early campaigns as masterpieces of strategy, blending speed, deception, and psychological insight in ways that stunned both allies and adversaries. One of the most striking aspects of his approach was his mastery of tactical innovation. While other commanders relied on sheer numbers or rigid formations, he emphasized flexibility, adaptability, and intelligence gathering. Scouts and spies became extensions of his mind, providing critical information that allowed him to strike decisively. He studied the terrain with meticulous care, positioning troops where geography would amplify their strength and hinder the enemy. Rivers became natural defenses, hills became vantage points, and forests provided concealment for ambushes. Each victory was meticulously planned, yet executed with a fluidity that made it seem spontaneous, a hallmark of his genius that both mystified his foes and inspired his followers. His campaigns were also theater. He understood that war was as much about perception as reality. Morale, he knew, could turn the tide as surely as swords or arrows. Before battle, he would visit camps, addressing soldiers with the gravitas of a leader who understood their fears and hopes. His words instilled confidence, his presence inspired loyalty. Conversely, the mere rumor of his approach sent enemy forces into disarray. Leaders who had once mocked his youth found themselves reacting defensively to an opponent who seemed to predict their every move. Historical accounts highlight battles where entire armies surrendered without fully engaging, outmatched by strategy and psychological dominance. Yet, the commander's victories were not without cost. He faced relentless logistical challenges, maintaining supply lines across hostile lands, coordinating multi-pronged assaults, and ensuring discipline among men of different cultures and backgrounds. Every maneuver required precision, a single misstep could spell disaster. Here, his intellect shone brightest. He employed innovative communication techniques, relied on trusted lieutenants, and often moved faster than rivals expected, creating momentum that became a force in itself. Each campaign strengthened his reputation, cementing his identity as a commander who could win battles others deemed unwinnable. The emotional stakes in this period were immense. Each victory elevated his status, yet each battle risked lives, honor, and future prospects. Soldiers and civilians alike came to see him as a savior and a symbol of national pride, while enemies began whispering tales of a commander whose brilliance bordered on the supernatural. Amidst the roar of triumph, he remained focused, calculating, and disciplined, aware that glory in the field did not guarantee security off it. This duality, heroism on the battlefield versus vulnerability in the corridors of power, created a tension that would define the next stage of his story. By the end of this section, the audience witnesses a man who is no longer just a prodigy but a master of warfare. From meticulously planned ambushes to large-scale sieges, his campaigns are presented with historical depth, tactical clarity, and cinematic tension. The audience feels the exhilaration of conquest, the thrill of clever maneuvers, and the weight of responsibility that comes with command. The section closes with his most celebrated battlefield victory yet, a moment that signals both the peak of his martial prowess and the subtle foreshadowing of challenges that no strategy, no matter how brilliant, could fully anticipate, the political storms awaiting him in the courts he is destined to navigate. Victory on the battlefield, however dazzling, did not shield the commander from the treacherous currents of politics. While his reputation grew among soldiers and the common people, the corridors of power in the royal court were far less forgiving. Here, ambition and envy operated on a different plane, subtle, insidious, and often lethal. Rival nobles, threatened by his growing influence, plotted quietly in shadows. Allies sometimes whispered loyalty while quietly undermining his authority. It became clear that in the game of crowns, strategy on the battlefield was only part of the challenge. Understanding human ambition and betrayal was equally vital. The commander's transition from military leader to political figure revealed a stark contrast between the tangible certainty of war and the murky uncertainty of courtly intrigue. In battle, decisions yielded clear outcomes. Territory was gained or lost, soldiers lived or died, victory or defeat declared. In politics, the outcomes were hidden, the stakes ambiguous, and the consequences often personal. Historical records detail secret meetings, whispered accusations, and alliances formed and broken with astonishing rapidity. Even a single misstep, a delayed response, a misplaced trust, a failure to anticipate jealousy, could shift the balance against him, no matter how brilliant his martial achievements. Emotionally, this period was fraught with tension and inner conflict. The commander, accustomed to command and respect, had to navigate a world where his strengths could be used against him. Admirers cautioned him to be wary, while enemies covertly plotted to exploit both his ambition and his honor. Each smile in the court could conceal a dagger, every compliment might carry hidden ridicule. The audience is drawn into his psychological struggle, a hero who has conquered armies but must now contend with invisible adversaries whose weapons are deceit, manipulation, and political cunning. These emotional beats create suspense and humanize a legendary figure, showing that even the greatest warriors are vulnerable when confronted with the subtleties of human ambition. Amid this turmoil, he attempted to wield influence with the same precision and foresight that had guided his campaigns. He forged alliances with key nobles, implemented reforms to stabilize the kingdom, and sought to extend his authority through measured diplomacy. Yet, despite meticulous planning, his enemies were relentless, exploiting every minor miscalculation. Historical detail highlights the intricate dynamics of the court, marriages arranged for political advantage, ceremonial gestures laden with significance, and clandestine councils plotting against him. These episodes underscore that power was never absolute, it was constantly negotiated and contested. The stakes were no longer just national, they were intensely personal. Reputation, honor, and legacy hung in the balance. Each political maneuver carried weighty consequences, and each misjudgment threatened not just authority, but survival. The commander's journey illustrates the timeless truth that military genius does not guarantee political safety. It also heightens narrative tension. Viewers are invested in both his triumphs and his vulnerabilities, witnessing the contrast between his battlefield dominance and the fragility of his position at court. By the end of this section, the audience sees a man caught between two worlds, revered by soldiers, feared by enemies, yet constantly navigating treacherous political currents. This section sets the stage for the impending crisis that will challenge the limits of his genius. It leaves viewers anticipating the clash between martial mastery and political scheming, a conflict that will eventually define his legacy as a commander who could win every war but might not secure his crown. Even the greatest victories on the battlefield could not shield the commander from the intricate web of betrayal that had been quietly woven around him. By now, his name was spoken with awe across kingdoms, yet within his own court, envy and fear festered. Allies he had once trusted began to question his loyalty, and rivals, patient and cunning, plotted to strip him of the crown he had so justly earned. History shows that power, when concentrated in one man, invites not only admiration but also conspiracies born of insecurity, greed, and ambition. His story now pivots from triumph to tragedy, from the clarity of military strategy to the chaos of human intrigue. The tension escalated gradually. Early warning signs emerged in subtle ways, rumors whispered in corridors, miscommunications that caused confusion, and unexpected reversals in key political alliances. The commander, accustomed to the directness of war, found himself navigating a battlefield without clear front lines. Courtiers manipulated perceptions, casting doubts on his decisions, while foreign emissaries sought to exploit divisions. Each maneuver he made to consolidate power was countered by unseen forces, as if the very crown he had fought for had become a magnet for treachery. This contrast, between battlefield dominance and political vulnerability, creates intense emotional drama, leaving the audience on edge as the first cracks in his empire begin to appear. The climax of this political storm arrived in a dramatic confrontation that combined strategy, betrayal, and personal anguish. Key advisors turned against him, fomenting dissent among the nobility and spreading accusations of mismanagement, disloyalty, or hubris. Even some of his most loyal soldiers were coerced or intimidated, creating fractures within the ranks. Historical records describe council meetings filled with tension, duels of rhetoric and cunning, and last-minute attempts to rally support that ultimately proved insufficient. The commander, brilliant on the battlefield, found himself outmaneuvered by the subtle, patient tactics of those who understood power in ways his sword could not reach. Emotionally, this period is devastating. The audience witnesses a hero forced to confront the limits of his own genius. Here is a man who had bent armies, rivers, and terrain to his will, now struggling to defend his position against invisible enemies. His confidence, once unshakable, is tested by deception, betrayal, and the realization that skill alone cannot always protect what is most precious. Suspense and empathy reach their peak, as viewers feel both admiration for his achievements and sorrow for his vulnerability, a combination that heightens the narrative impact. Despite the personal and political assaults, the commander did not succumb quietly. He attempted last-ditch measures, alliances with external powers, appeals to the common people, and strategic countermoves intended to reclaim control. These efforts, however, were fragmented and undermined by the relentless scheming of those around him. Each attempt at recovery only highlighted the growing isolation he faced, emphasizing the dramatic irony. The same intelligence that made him undefeatable in battle was insufficient to navigate the subtleties of betrayal at court. By the end of this section, the commander is forcibly removed, abdicates, or is otherwise stripped of his crown, despite a record of unbroken military victories. The contrast between battlefield invincibility and political defeat is stark, leaving viewers with a profound sense of tragedy and the lingering question of how brilliance can coexist with human vulnerability. This section sets the stage for his exile, reflection, and eventual legacy, underscoring that even the most celebrated heroes are not immune to the machinations of power. The audience is left emotionally invested, anticipating the intimate exploration of his life after loss and the lessons that emerge from a commander who conquered nations but could not secure the throne. Stripped of his crown and forced into exile, the commander confronted a world that was both familiar and alien. Though he had once commanded legions and inspired nations, he now walked among strangers, reliant on cautious allies and facing the persistent threat of those who sought to end his influence permanently. The very skills that had made him invincible on the battlefield, strategic genius, decisiveness, and tactical foresight, were now tested in a far more subtle arena: survival, diplomacy, and personal resilience. The audience witnesses a man forced to redefine power, not through conquest, but through wisdom, patience, and the careful cultivation of support from unexpected quarters. Exile became both a crucible and a classroom. He observed other courts, studied foreign tactics, and reflected on the interplay between ambition and hubris. Historical records and chronicles describe him advising new rulers, sharing his knowledge with protégés, or quietly influencing political outcomes from the shadows. Each step of this journey highlights the contrast between glory and limitation. He could teach others to win wars, yet he himself remained barred from the throne he had earned. Emotionally, the audience experiences the tension between pride and humility, achievement and loss, and the lingering pain of a hero confronted with the consequences of human frailty. During this period, he also wrestled with inner turmoil. Memories of battlefield victories, once sources of pride, now mingled with bitter reflections on betrayal and the fragility of power. Letters, personal accounts, and chronicles of the time reveal a man who questioned his own choices, the nature of loyalty, and the costs of ambition. These intimate moments humanize the commander, allowing viewers to connect deeply with someone often depicted as larger than life. He is no longer merely a figure of awe. He is a man confronting regret, isolation, and the complex calculus of legacy. Yet even in exile, his presence remained influential. Commanders, kings, and generals sought his counsel, and his reputation as a master strategist grew even beyond the borders of his former kingdom. He became a symbol of enduring brilliance tempered by the fragility of human institutions, a reminder that power, while fleeting, can leave an indelible mark when wielded with skill and vision. Historical detail enriches this narrative. Campaigns he could no longer fight directly were guided by his advice, alliances were shaped by his insight, and even distant enemies feared the shadow of his reputation. By the end of this section, the audience grasps the full spectrum of his journey: triumph and tragedy, power and vulnerability, fame and exile. Emotional resonance is heightened as viewers understand that while he may have lost the crown, his influence, wisdom, and legacy endured. This sets the stage for the final reflection on his life and the lessons he left behind, ensuring that the audience remains invested in the story's ultimate resolution. The commander's post-fall years are not defined by defeat, but by the quiet assertion of enduring greatness, preparing viewers for the concluding meditation on his legacy and historical significance. Though he never reclaimed the throne, the commander's influence endured long after his exile. Generations of military leaders studied his campaigns, dissecting his strategies, ambushes, and battlefield innovations. Historians praised not only his tactical brilliance but also his understanding of morale, logistics, and human psychology, lessons that would shape warfare for centuries. His victories became case studies in military academies, his maneuvers the standard against which other commanders measured their skill, and his story a blueprint for ambition tempered by caution. Even without a crown, his name became synonymous with strategic genius. His legacy extended beyond warfare. Political thinkers examined his career as a study in leadership, authority, and the limits of power. Philosophers and chroniclers debated the delicate balance between ambition and prudence, exploring how a man could command armies yet falter in courtly intrigue. These reflections transformed him into more than a military icon. He became a cautionary figure, embodying the paradox that brilliance in one sphere does not guarantee mastery in all. Emotionally, this duality resonates with audiences, evoking both admiration and empathy, and prompting reflection on the nature of success, recognition, and human vulnerability. Culturally, his story inspired literature, art, and folklore. Songs, poems, and epic tales recounted his victories and lamented his losses, ensuring that his legend was passed down across generations. The human drama of his life, triumph intertwined with betrayal, provided enduring narrative appeal, allowing historians and storytellers alike to explore timeless themes: honor, courage, ambition, and the fragile nature of power. By framing his life as both exemplary and cautionary, the audience is left with a nuanced understanding of greatness and its costs. As the documentary closes, viewers are encouraged to reflect on the broader lessons of his life. His brilliance reshaped warfare, his courage inspired loyalty, and his misfortunes underscored the vulnerabilities inherent in human ambition. The final moments leave the audience with a sense of awe tempered by contemplation, a commander who won every war yet lost the crown, a figure whose life reminds us that legacy is not measured solely by titles or possessions, but by the enduring impact of vision, courage, and intellect. In the end, history remembers him not as a fallen king, but as a timeless exemplar of strategy, resilience, and the complex interplay between glory and human limitation.